Hello and welcome. There was a strong turnout, but can Iraqis really change the direction of their country through the ballot box? Millions of Iraqis came out to vote for a new parliament on Sunday, and soon the difficult task of putting together a coalition government will begin. But the cloud of civil war and sectarianism is still hanging over the country. It was the second national election since the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, with more than 6,000 candidates running for the 325 seats of the Council of Representatives. Bombing attacks took the lives of at least 36 people, with scores injured, but many Iraqis emphasized that it would take more than a few bombs to keep them away from the polls. Several estimates put the current Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, slightly ahead of his main rival, Iyad Alawi. Mr. Maliki's list is predominantly Shia, while Alawi's party has emerged as a secular, non-sectarian bloc that supports shifting the country away from Iran and towards the Arab states. In the northern part of the country, competition between the Kurdish parties was intense, and Arab-Kurd tensions soared prior to the vote. After the last elections, the Kurds, who make up almost 20% of Iraq's population, played the role of kingmaker in Baghdad. Their role after this vote remains to be seen. The result will be known in a few days, but no single party is expected to win a clear majority, and the horse trading to form a new coalition government might take months. Today we ask, with this election, how clearly have Iraqis put aside their sectarian and ethnic differences to launch a new era of stability? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or an email, and we'll take your phone calls on the show as well. Today I'm joined from Baghdad by Dr. Nada Ibrahim, a member of the Iraqi Council of Representatives who ran in yesterday's election under the National Dialogue Front, which is headed by the outspoken Sunni leader Saleh Mutlaq. Also from Iraq, we're joined by Intifad Kanbar, a candidate from Iraqi Nationalist Alliance, a mostly Shia coalition. From 2000 and 2003, Intifad was director of the US office of the Iraqi National Congress, which provided much of the now discredited information that led to the Iraqi war. And here in Washington, we have Qubad Talabani, the representative of the Kurdistan regional government in the United States and son of the Iraqi President Jalal Talabani. I welcome you all to the show. And Dr. Ibrahim, if I could start with you, please, ma'am, and ask, in your opinion, was this a free and fair election?
Well, actually, we went to election after all what happened with us, after we started for the sake of the country and for the sake of the democratic process in Iraq. We went to this election yesterday, and we encourage our people also to go and vote, and it was really a good and high percentage in many areas of Baghdad, because I'm running my campaign in Baghdad. And after all the obstacle we had it since starting by the election law, and the obstacle of being many people in the political groups were against the Iraqis outside the countries who were refugees after 2003, ending by the list of de-Baathification who put many names of the nationalist people on that list, preventing them from going to the election. Starting with Mr. Al-Mutlaq, the head of my group, ending with 511
One thing names. I want to ask you this though. So many Iraqis say they didn't care anymore whether the candidates were Shia or Sunni. They just wanted good governance. And I wonder, to what extent are we seeing the Iraqi people coming together properly now and saying, look, we want an end to this chaos, the civil strife, and actually want some kind of unity in the country? Or do you think that the sectarian differences will still keep the country divided? Dr. Ibrahim.
Actually, I didn't hear the whole question.
Really, I'm wondering if the...
I hear half of it, but I can understand from your... No, I can understand from your question about people now, they vote for Iraq. And the sectarian divisions of the Iraqis were brought abroad after 2003. A few of the politicians who came from, they were outsider, came to this country with Bremer's law, the unfair Bremer's law. They divide Iraq to those three sectors. In the history of Iraq, there is no sectarianism. And yesterday, people vote for Iraq, and it was a very successful hope for Iraqis to be I want to explain here
let me do one thing.
very important.
Let me get back to you, Dr.
That the
Ibrahim.
Iraqis were...
Let me get back to you in just a second. I'll tell you why, because I just want to quickly get from Intifad. I'll come right back to you, I promise you. But we have Intifad Kanbar also in Baghdad, and I want to try and bring you into the conversation and ask if this election might reflect some of the issues faced in the previous election in 2005, and it took more than 150 days for a new government to be formed because of all the arguing and negotiating, and there was a political vacuum in that time. Is that likely to happen this time as well?
I don't think so, because we have worked very hard before the elections time to contact our allies and to form post-election alliances. You know that you mentioned rightly in your report that there's no one bloc in the parliament can form the government on its own, and has to cross over to other blocs to form alliances. We have, for example, strategic alliance with the Kurds, which always we will work together to form a government. That's one thing, and we are open for other alliances, obviously, depending on two main factors. First, how close the other bloc to the Ba'ath Party and the Ba'ath ideas. That will be a no-no for us. The second thing, we have a program. We have a program, very clear program, that is going to we put together, and over 100 experts wrote it before the election. It's not an election program, it's a governing program, including a housing revolution in Iraq, to build the needed 2 million houses in Iraq in the upcoming 10 years. Our program and our principles will basically indicate what kind of alliances we are going to have to form the government. But I believe this time is going to be different. The stakes are too high. There's a US withdrawal, and the Iraqi people need an efficient government very quickly.
Khubat Talabani, good to talk with you as well. Thanks for joining us. This was the first time that the elections were held for actual candidates as opposed to the lists. How do you think that changed the campaign? How do you think that will affect the outcome?
I think it's hopefully for the better, because what we're expecting now is that the candidates that will be sent to the parliament as a result of these elections will be held more accountable, because people have directly voted for those candidates, which I think is a far more transparent process. It did create some complications in trying to explain the system, but I think once we got through that hurdle, you know, people were excited about it, and candidates campaigned harder, and I think now it's the fun and games of forming the government, as Intifad said, which is no easy task. The
challenge you have this time, though, is certainly in the Kurdish bloc you had more divisions, because previously it stuck together more as a voting bloc, which gave it clout above its numbers. I mean, the Kurdish population had more clout. They were the kingmakers, as I was saying in the introduction, through the power with the coalitions and stuff it made, the bloc made. What difference has it made this time than having everyone split up like this?
I think it's pretty much nationally. If you look at the 2005 elections, the Iraqi Shia formed one big coalition. Mainstream Sunni political parties boycotted the process, and the Kurds did come under one coalition. This time around, you've seen competition for the Shia vote. You have strong Sunni participation across the country, and certainly in the Kurdistan region, there is also a diversity in the participation. So that makes it very exciting in terms of when you're forming the government. It's really about who forms the best coalition, which will ultimately result in who becomes prime minister.
All right, I'll get back to you in a second as well. Dr. Nada Ibrahim, thanks for your patience. I said to you I'd come back to you. You wanted to make a point in particular, and I wanted to get your take on how much freedom there was for all the candidates to take part in the election, considering there had been this issue of the ban of many of the Sunni candidates.
Actually, you were talking about the alliances after the election.
Okay.
And we are heading for a change in the country and change in the political map of Iraq. What I wanted to say is we are far away of sectarianism, not because of the succeed of the politician or the success of the political parties, but the Iraqis succeed to be far away, and they discover that this is an agenda from outside to them. and they gain nothing from what happened after those few years. Only there is bad situation of the Iraqis, no services, and the economic have been, sluggish in the development, and the Iraqis now not in a good condition. What we are heading for this big change in the country, and I think the future alliances will be with all the nationalists in the Iraqi and other nationalists in other lists can manage themselves to have a government.
Okay.
And it also depends on the result of the election. We cannot say anything now because it seems that more or less the results will be equal, maybe between the three blocks, Iraqiyya, Dawlat al-Qanun, and al-Itilaf al-Watani. Maybe more or less there is something near to each other by results.
Okay. Now we have to.
So in this case, there will be no one group.
I'm sorry, I'm just sorry because we have a satellite delay, it causes problems. I'm going to get back to you again in a second. Just before we take a break, Ali in the UK, let's get your question. We'll get an answer after the break. Ali, what would you like to ask?
I'm personally think a sort of a balanced parliament among the four groups, the four major groups. I would like to ask any one of your guests whom they expect to join which party to form the new government.
We'll look at the analysis of the potential coalitions coming up in a moment. We're going to take a very short break here. We'll continue the discussion when we return. Welcome back. We're discussing the possible outcome of Sunday's elections in Iraq and how close the country is to being on a path of reconciliation and stability. From Baghdad, I'm joined by Dr. Nada Ibrahim, a sitting member of the Iraqi Council of Representatives, who ran for a second term on the Iraqi list led by the former Prime Minister Iyad Alawi. Also with us is Intifat Kanbar, who ran for a seat in the council as well as being a member of the Iraqi National Alliance. And here in Washington, D.C. is Qubad Talabani, the envoy of the Kurdistan regional government to the U.S. As I get back, I'll put this to you, Qubad Talabani, the issue of coalitions that Ali was asking about. How is it looking like it's lining up?
Well, it's very close, and obviously the results will determine who has a commanding role in coalition formation process, but we're expecting the race to be very close, which really gets down to who has the art, who has the skill of forming the best coalition. There are no surprise candidates in these elections. I think everyone that took part, everyone that's heading up the blocks are a known commodity. We know where each person stands on the key issues that remain to be addressed in the country. For us as Kurds, we are looking to see who is going to abide by the constitution the most, because that is what's most important for us. And
of course what's important is stability in the country, because the US has set a timetable for withdrawal. And I'll put this email to you that we got from Anila Khan, if I may, sent into our Facebook page. It says, an already divided nation will not gain anything out of these engineered polls. How about persuading the US to leave the land first? What's your view on that?
Well, the problems in Iraq are not a result of the US presence in Iraq. I mean, there are serious challenges that need to be addressed, and this is why the government that forms after these elections are so crucial for the country, because it'll be this government that manages a transitioning US from Iraq, but it'll also be this government that will be in charge of addressing the key political and security issues facing the country.
Well, Intifat Kanbar, if I could bring you back in here and ask an email question to you, sir. This came in from Elena Benador. To our Facebook page as well, and Elena wrote in saying, how is security going to be guaranteed by the new government when US troops leave, and for how long can plans to separate Kurdistan be put off?
Well, first of all, when the US troops now under 100,000, their security role is very minimal, and I think as this number will decrease to 50,000 very soon, I think it's going to be completely the job of the government. That's why we think we have to have an efficient government, and that's why we think the de-Ba'athification of the Ba'athist officers from the government is very necessary at this point. We were told that when the de-Ba'athification is going to happen in the elections, the election process is going to stop. It's not going to work. Obviously, it worked very well. The United Nations approved it. The EU team approved it. The French monitoring team has approved it, and it went very well. So de-Ba'athification did not stand in the way of a smooth political process. Also, I must tell you here, it's important to know that our alliance and Maliki's bloc we're running neck and neck, and I think our differences in the number of seats was very, very, very small. I think Alawi is way behind these two blocs, and that's what I'm hearing from the Electoral Commission now. And I think also there is a very serious attempt to undermine the election results up front and create an environment of discredibility to these elections. I think this is not going to be useful for anyone, and I think this is not going to be taken very seriously by the Iraqi people.
Dr. Nada Ibrahim, you're actually a staunch candidate, a staunch advocate for women's rights. And during the last parliament, the 72 women of the Iraqi Council of Representatives could not come together to form a women's caucus to create a lobbying group to fight for women's rights. Was that because of religious and ethnic differences? And can those differences be overcome to create a stronger position for women in the council?
Actually, as a woman in the last council, there was no strong caucus because the woman came on the closed list, and all the groups came as, you know, those three as sectarian division between Sunni, Shi'i, Kurd, and Arab, and like this. So they were related to their parties and taking orders, maybe majority of them taking orders from their parties, and so we couldn't have a good caucus which fight for women's rights or for other important things than women's rights. For instance, I will mention here, we need more than where your guests were telling is about. In the next parliament, we need a strong caucus for women who defend the families of the people who have been putting under lists not to have the rights to have jobs, not to have the rights to take their role in the community. We need the women to play a good role in the real reconciliation for the national interest of the Iraqis.
Okay, wonderful.
We need to change few things inside this constitution, because there is many obstacles in the constitution for the families and for women exactly.
Okay.
Like
Dr. Ibrahim,
41,
sorry, because of the
other things.
Dr. Ibrahim, I have to interrupt you. Sorry, because of the satellite delay. It's hard. I need to bring in a Khubad Talabani here because there's a question I want to put to you that we got from a viewer, if I may.
Today is a Women's Day. You have to give me the right to talk for women.
I am. Unfortunately, yeah, and that's absolutely fine. Unfortunately, we've got just a couple of minutes, and I have to make sure I get the other guests' views as well. Khubad Billy Hussein in the UK says the elections in Iraq so far seem to be triggering division rather than union. Iraqi politicians are the ones who win at the end of the day. They exploit the political, ethnic and religious split within the country for their own benefit. Have things moved on from there?
I think things have moved on. Obviously, elections raise tensions, they raise passions, they raise emotions. So we can expect those passions to run high during an election and during the counting process. But I think what people understand is, and we saw this in 2005, when Iraqi politicians were bickering over positions, the country descended into a very dangerous situation. We're hoping to prevent a repeat of that this time around. Obviously, the issues are very important, the challenges are very high, they're not going to be smoothed over very easily, but I think people understand that we have to live within a federal democracy. We have to abide by the country's constitutions, and we have to try to build institutions from the ground up and move away from the cult of personalities that's driven Iraqi politics for centuries now. Well,
let's get a call in from the UK. Mohammed's on the line, patiently waiting. Mohammed, go ahead.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
My question is directed to Mr. Talabani, who is there just because he's the son of Mr. Jalal Talabani. Anyway, the question is, could you tell us your views about the vote rigging which just happened in Kurdistan and by PUK? And could you tell us, just please, who's responsible for attacking our TV channel KNN all over Kurdistan, in Kirkuk, in Suleimania, in
Mohammed,
other places.
Let's give Combat Talabani a chance to answer those. Some fairly strong comments there.
Strong comments, but unsubstantiated, where there is the independent Iraqi Electoral Commission that is monitoring the elections. There are hundreds of international observers, hundreds and thousands of Iraqi observers at the polling stations. They are the ones that will ultimately determine whether this was a free and fair election. I think by large, across the board, across the country and in the Kurdistan region, the elections were pretty free and fair.
A quick question to Mr. Kanbar here that we got from a viewer by the name of Larry Melby, if I may. We've got less than a minute, so if I can ask you, is there any movement on the sharing of oil revenues, he asks? Have the players staked out the positions from which they'll be negotiating? Mr. Kanbar.
Well, our program in the INA basically calls for 4 revolutionary, I would call, oil programs. One of them is basically to legislate a new law for the Iraqi National Oil Company, in which the Iraqi National Oil Company will have enough shares and each Iraqi will own 1 share. Cannot sell it, cannot buy it, and according to this share, the Iraqis will get 10% of the profit of this company as a dividend every year. There's also
unfortunately, I have to interrupt you there.
Program for fighting.
You have to forgive me. Sorry, I have to interrupt you only because we're desperately out of time, and I do want to thank you all for taking part. Obviously, many more questions and never enough time. Thanks for being with us too with your questions. Remember, you can watch a podcast of the show on iTunes. This week, we're featuring a discussion on whether or not Chechny's President Ramzan Kadyrov is pushing the region towards another conflict. On the next show, we continue our coverage of Iraq's parliamentary election and look at how the vote may impact America's withdrawal plans. President Obama promised he'd have all combat troops out of the country by August, but how realistic is that? The former US ambassador to Iraq, Zalmay Khalilzad, will join us on the show. Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.